Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for August 21st, 2018. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the latest film and TV news. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me in today's podcast is Slash Film Managing Editor Jacob Paul.
Hello, hello.
And writers Hoai-Tran Boyle.
Hey, everyone.
And Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
Okay, guys, it's we don't have a lot of news today, but we got some interesting. Actually, we got a late breaking news that Danny Boyle is leaving the Bond series, Bond 25, over creative differences. Jacob, I know you are a big James Bond fan. You've been our main correspondent on this whole Bond watch. What is going on here?
Well, earlier today, Eon, the company that produces the Bond films, announced Danny Boyle is leaving Bond 25, which is currently untitled, over creative differences, which is the blanket term they always use in Hollywood when somebody needs to leave something. So for all I know, this was a completely amicable split. For all I know, there was screaming matches. We don't know. I've been watching around the internet to see if anybody has shed some light on why this happened. We do not know. The only fact right now is that Danny Boyle is no longer directing the 25th James Bond movie. And this is simultaneously surprising and not surprising. It's surprising because it's shocking. The film was being written. It was going to start shooting in December. It has a release date for next year. But it's not surprising because Danny Boyle doesn't quite fit the mold of a Bond director. For decades, the Bond series was very much about finding these journeyman directors who can come in, call the shots, make sure things are done on time and on budget, while the producers, the Broccoli family, who have controlled the Bond rights since the beginning, sort of shaped the vision of the series. And only in recent years, with Mark Forster and Sam Mendes directing the last three films, has there been this shift toward these auteur directors, these guys with a vision sort of taking hold. But Danny Boyle, more so than those guys, he's a very distinctive director, very distinctive style. And while we don't know for sure what happened, I can't help but take the feeling that Danny Boyle wanted to make a Danny Boyle film, whereas the Bond producers wanted a Bond film. So I'm not surprised at this split. And now the big question now is who takes over.
Yeah, that is the big question. I know the internet is all, Chris Nolan, but I feel like if they had problems with Danny Boyle, then I don't think the creative juices, Chris Nolan needs to be given the creative freedom, right?
Oh, of course. Chris Nolan is always a popular choice because Chris Nolan is a Bond fan, has gone on the record as being a Bond fan, but he's the exact opposite of a person you want making a Bond movie. You want somebody who plays nice, who works within the Bond sandbox. And Chris Nolan, he makes Christopher Nolan movies. He makes movies he wants to make. If the Bond producers sold the Bond rights and went off to retire and another studio got it, and maybe Chris Nolan someday in the future, but not right now, who I suggested in the article I wrote in Slash Film, I think that they need somebody like Martin Campbell, who directed GoldenEye and Casino Royale. This really solid director, really good at action, really good at character work, has experience directing this kind of movie, who also plays nice, who also knows how to deliver a film for the producers. That's the kind of role that the Bond director requires. And I wouldn't be surprised if Martin Campbell was somebody who they've had discussions about, because it would be a nice bookend if he directed the first Daniel Craig Bond movie and the final one. But Campbell's been very iffy about returning to the Bond series, and there's all these tabloidy rumors about how him and Craig didn't get along. So even if it's not Martin Campbell, I think somebody in that vein is who we should be looking for. We shouldn't be looking at Christopher Nolan. We should be looking at these guys who are working professionals and who maybe see themselves as, craftsmen rather than artists.
I also see a lot on Twitter, a lot of people recommending Christopher McQuarrie. Which seems a little bit on the nose to me, after him doing 2 Mission Impossible movies. Chris HT, do you have any suggestions on who you'd like to see direct a Bond movie?
I don't really have any strong opinions. I just have never had a really strong connection with the Bond movies, except for perhaps Skyfall. And it was because of those artistic sort of license that Sam Mendes took. So, yeah, just do what you want, Bond people.
I'm on the same page as you. Chris, I know you like the Bond movies a little bit more than us. What do you think?
I'll do it. I will direct the film if they want me to do it. Just hit me up. I'm on Twitter. Like Jacob said, there are a lot of people on Twitter suggesting big names, and that's not going to happen. It's going to be, again, like Jacob said, it's going to be a workman director. It's going to be someone who can deliver it on time and on budget, and it's not going to be.
So it's not going to be Guy Ritchie.
Right. It's not going to be, and like I'm seeing people suggesting Christopher McQuarrie, and he just did Mission Impossible. There's no way he's going to be like, yes, I will do Bond now. As great as that would be, he's a great director. It's not going to happen. So,
just
temper your expectations.
Just give us a Man from U.N.C.L.E. sequel. That's all we need.
Also, speaking of McQuarrie, there's no way they let an American direct a Bond movie. They'll let any other nationality direct a Bond movie, but the day they let an American do it is the day the Bond franchise is on its last legs.
Yeah, it was actually interesting too that I think there was rumors recently that the Broccoli family was thinking about selling the Bond franchise. So I don't know. It seems like this news seems to suggest that they are still very heavily involved in not wanting to give up their creative control, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they did have those thoughts about selling it, because Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson, who've been running the franchise since the 90s, since GoldenEye, when Barbara's father, Cubby Broccoli, died. They're not young people. I bet they want to enjoy their retirement. I bet they would take the many millions of dollars they can get from selling the Bond movies and going off and enjoying themselves. But I think that if that does happen, it'll be long after Daniel Craig is done, after Bond 25, after that dust has settled.
Okay, let's move on to our next bit of news, and that is that Kevin Smith is doing a Hit Girl comic set in the Kick-Ass universe that will pit the Kick-Ass character against the Predators of Hollywood. HT, what is going on?
So this new comic 4-issue miniseries is called Hit Girl, The Golden Rage of Hollywood, quite on the nose. And it's penned by Kevin Smith. It's his first project after he's been recovering from his heart attack that he had earlier this year. And he wrote a 4-issue miniseries for the Hit Girl comic book run that will also feature contributions by Jeff Lemire and Eduardo Risso. So Hit Girl, The Golden Rage of Hollywood follows Hit Girl as she heads to Hollywood to target the Predators of Hollywood in their comeuppance post Harvey Weinstein. And it kind of is very timely and on the nose. And because this is Miller World, of course, the Me Too movement has to have a healthy heaping of bloodshed and violence.
And it is interesting that Kevin Smith is doing this because, Kevin Smith, his entire career is probably owed to Harvey Weinstein. I wonder if Harvey Weinstein will appear as a character in, this Kick-Ass comic book. I feel like, Deadpool and Kick-Ass are the only two kind of big franchises that can pull off that kind of mix of meta-ness in the real world. Jacob, you are our biggest comic book guy on the site. And I know you're not a huge fan of Kick-Ass, but what do you think of this news?
I think it fits very much in with the Mark Millar template. Even though he's not writing it, this is very much about being as shocking and as offensive as possible while going after targets who are easy to hit. And that's fine. I mean, I'm all for a comic book where a female superhero takes revenge on the worst of the worst. And I don't think we'll see Harvey Weinstein in it, but I bet we'll see an analog. We'll see somebody who looks and sounds a lot like him so they don't get sued. Yeah, I mean, it's Mark Millar. He has his thing. Kevin Smith seems to be playing into that thing, and that's fine. I mean, Kevin Smith's, for my money, a better comic book writer than he's a film director because it allows him to emphasize his strengths, which is writing, while he lets an artist handle the visuals. So even though I won't pick this up, I mean, if you're a Kick-Ass fan, if you like Mark Millar, if you like Kevin Smith, it's a good combination of things.
Yeah, if you are a Kevin Smith fan and have never checked out some of his comic book runs, I would highly recommend checking out his run on Daredevil, which back in the day, I remember it being fantastic. It's probably on the level of the good stuff that comes out today. Does he have any other comic book runs that you might recommend, Jacob?
I actually really enjoyed his Green Arrow run, which is all collected, I believe, in one big hardcover if that interests you. Mainly because Green Arrow is a character who's not sacred to a lot of people, so he manages to have a lot of fun with him that way.
Yes. Okay, let's move on to our next bit of news, and that is for the Star Wars animated series, Star Wars Resistance. We now have learned that Leia Organa will be part of that series, and it will be set 6 months before The Force Awakens. Chris, you wrote this up for the site. What do we know?
So we're starting to get a better idea of how the Star Wars world, the Star Wars universe, is going to handle Leia as a character in the aftermath of Carrie Fisher's death. I mean, as we already know, archival footage of Carrie Fisher is going to be used for the next Star Wars film, and now her character, General Leia Organa, is going to be a character in Star Wars Resistance, voiced by voice actress Rachel Butera, who has a very long career of nothing but voice acting. So she's kind of a pro at this. At one point, when the trailer for Star Wars Resistance dropped, someone went ahead and looked at the source code of the trailer on the Star Wars website, and buried in that code was a synopsis that revealed the show is set about 6 months before The Force Awakens. And then after this broke, someone on the Star Wars website went back and removed that. So for some reason, they're trying to keep the timeline of the show a secret. I'm not really sure why, but that's the general idea we have now, is that it's set about 6 months before The Force Awakens.
Having General Leia in the show shouldn't come out as a huge surprise. I mean, this does follow the Resistance before Force Awakens, and she is a general in the Resistance. She's a big part of that. So it is. I am glad that they were able to find a voice actress to play the character, and they're not trying to piece it together with lines from Carrie Fisher's career or something like that. But it is interesting, I think, this news that if it is set 6 months before The Force Awakens, I think that seems to signal that in my mind, this animated series doesn't have has kind of like a short runway of what it could do, because once they hit the events of Force Awakens, Force Awakens and then Last Jedi happen kind of like back to back. Unless they're going to jump in time to the events between Last Jedi and, whatever they call Episode 9, they only have 6 months of material, which, if you look at, Star Wars Rebels, that took place over, a handful of years. Each one of those seasons was almost like a year in the Rebellion. So, I'm wondering what you guys think. Do you think this indicates that this show as a whole is just going to take place as a prequel to Force Awakens, or do you think this is something they could keep on going with after, Episode 9 and do a time jump?
Well, one thing that's I think is that if you look at the original trilogy, there is this big space between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, whereas there's not much time between Empire and Return of the Jedi. So many of the original Star Wars books, comics, spin-off stories, video games, so many of them took place between Star Wars and Empire, because there's this big, juicy chunk of time in which you could have the freedom to tell a lot of stories. So you're right, 6 months is not a lot of time to tell a lot of stories for Star Wars Resistance. But I wouldn't be surprised if they used this 6 months to set up the characters, set up this world, and then maybe jump forward a year or two in season 2 and start exploring the space after Last Jedi, and start building that space as the new playground, the new area where all the rest of the comics and video games and TV shows take place. Because you really can't say anything between the first two movies, but I think we're going to see this really healthy space in between the second and third movies where a lot of stuff's going to start taking place. And I think this show may be quietly sliding into that position.
I also wonder if, I've speculated on this podcast about Better Call Saul in this way, but I wonder if they're going to do that, if they could do it in a way that, the second season or third season of Star Wars Resistance takes place during the events of Force Awakens and, Last Jedi, but shows them from a totally different angle with different characters and stuff like that. Or if that, I don't know. I'm wondering if that would even be compelling on, for television audiences. Whatever the case, this series starts airing this October 7th. So we will see it before we see, J.J. Abrams' Star Wars Episode 9, and we'll find out more then. But let's move on to our next story, and that is of the box office. Leading up to the release of Crazy Rich Asians, we're wondering how well it would do at the box office. There was a lot of people invested in a movie of this caliber succeeding. Our own David Chen of the Slash Film Cast bought out an entire theater in support of this movie because he wanted to see it do well. And now we have the box office results, which Jacob, you can talk about, but I'm actually a little bit more interested in this Kevin Spacey movie, which had an embarrassing debut. But tell us about both of them, Jacob.
Yeah, I'll get started with the good news, which is Crazy Rich Asians opened to $34 million over its 5-day opening from Wednesday through Sunday, which is, I'd say, about 16 million more than some of the early estimates had it. And for a movie that costs $30 million for a romantic comedy about a marginalized group of people, that's really strong. And I'm really curious to see the second weekend, see how little or how much it drops off. But at this point, it's pretty much a hit, and that's really exciting news for a movie that really seems to be thrilling a lot of people and warming a lot of hearts. And I know HT can say a lot more about the movie than I can, so I'll stop there. It's really lovely to see it top the box office. But for those of us who like reveling in disaster, there is the Billionaire Boys Club, a movie that was dumped into a handful of theaters and made $618 over its 3-day opening weekend. That's 618, not 6,000, not 60,000. That's 3 numbers, $618. This movie stars Ansel Elgort, Taron Egerton, Emma Roberts, and, well, Kevin Spacey. And so the headlines over the past few days have been making fun of the fact that Kevin Spacey, now disgraced following all of his inappropriate behavior, like I'm fired in House of Cards, has starred in a movie that had a disastrous opening. And in one level, it's maybe slightly disingenuous to put us all on Kevin Spacey. Billionaire Boys Club was shot 2.5 years ago. It was being dumped into theaters. It's being released on VOD at the same time. It was never going to make a lot of money. It was always going to be a disaster. It was always going to be that was swept under the rug as fast as possible. But because Kevin Spacey's in it, it becomes the story of Kevin Spacey and his continued box office decline. So it's just it went from being a movie that was just going to be a footnote to a movie that's just another embarrassment, another chapter in the downfall of Kevin Spacey, but he's dragging down everybody else with him. So I'm curious what you guys think. Is this a story about Kevin Spacey, or is just a Kevin Spacey label being placed onto a movie that otherwise would never be noticed?
Well, I mean, I do think you're right. It is a movie that would have otherwise not gotten noticed. It played in 10 screens. If you do the math here, Jacob, it looks like, 62 to 60, maybe 60 to 70 people probably saw this movie. And then if you divide that per screen, that's what, like 6 or 7 people per screen over a week period or weekend period. That's pretty horrible. Like,
yeah, it's horrible.
Most independent movies I go to see at my local AMC theater have more than that in one screening, and like these are really small movies, not with stars like Kevin Spacey.
Yeah, I'm all about dunking Kevin Spacey. Let's trash him, man. He deserves it. I'm just not entirely convinced that people were avoiding this because it's Kevin Spacey. I think they're avoiding it because it's an Ansel Elgort movie with a very bad title. but that's just me.
Actually, when I was looking up, because I was so morbidly fascinated by this just horrible performance that I was looking up the story, and it's based on a real story, and it also had a TV movie that was released, I think, in the 90s, and that was, I think, really funny, with the same title as well, Billionaire Boys Club. And that was really funny to me because I don't know if that one did any better. It was a TV movie, but it's not an uncommon title, I guess.
I mean, I personally didn't even know this movie was out. So I do kind of agree that, even though I have no problem mocking Kevin Spacey, I do think this is more a case of no one actually even is aware this movie exists. Like, I've seen zero advertisement for it. So,
yeah, when you have people working for a movie website full time who have not seen any advertisements for a movie, that probably tells you something. But okay, let's move on to our last and final stories. First up, Mr. Robot Season 4. Is that going to be the final season? HT, what do we know?
According to star Christian Slater, it may be the final season. So in an interview with Collider, Christian Slater says that he believes the upcoming 4th season will be the last season, which kind of is in line with creator Sam Esmail's predictions from a few years ago that the show would last 4 or 5 seasons, depending on USA. So Slater said, Esmail always said it was going to be somewhere in that zone, and he didn't want to go any further than what he could creatively contribute to that storyline. So I think that season 4 will be it. So it kind of makes sense because Sam Esmail originally pitched this story as a feature film, and he always had an idea for where the story would end with the show. And the 3rd season kind of felt like it was hurtling towards some sort of ending anyways. And the momentum has been kind of slowing down since we've had longer breaks between seasons. And not to mention Sam Esmail is becoming more and more busy with his prepping his return to feature filmmaking with a film also with Mr. Robot star Rami Malek. So and it kind of makes sense that he would be turning his eyes to other things.
Yeah, and like the storyline on that show, as you said, is escalating at a point that you can't keep escalating further. Like at some point it has to reach a peak and ending, and I feel like it makes sense for season 4 to be that climactic ending. But we'll see. Let's get to our last story, and that is Blumhouse would love to raise the Dark Universe from the grave. Chris, I know you are ironically a fan of the Dark Universe. Do you want to see this happen?
I do, actually. So Jason Blum was on Twitter answering some random Q&A questions from everyone and anyone, and someone casually asked him if he would like to take over the Dark Universe, which, as we all know, is Universal's instantly failed attempt to start their own Marvel-like cinematic universe using their classic monsters. And Jason Blum responded that yes, he would. Now, of course, this isn't an official announcement. This doesn't mean Jason Blum is taking it over, but it's not out of line of question. I mean, Blumhouse has a deal with Universal, so something like that could potentially happen. And personally, if this happened, it would probably be much better than the approach they were originally taking, because Blumhouse, they make low budget horror movies, and that's really the best way to approach these classic monsters. I mean, one of the biggest mistakes Universal made with their Dark Universe is that they were approaching these films as like big action movies, which I don't think anyone honestly wants. I mean, horror as a genre is bigger now than it's ever been. People want horror, especially when they think of the classic Universal monsters. They don't think of them in terms of action heroes. So I don't know what is going to happen with the Dark Universe at this point, if anything. But when and if Universal decides to try it again, they'd be wise to take a lower budget horror based approach, similar to what Blumhouse does.
Yeah, well, Blumhouse is just so profitable. Their whole method of making movies on the cheap, using constraints creatively, and able to make huge successes out of small budget films. We saw the success of The Shape of Water, which could have easily been The Creature from the Black Lagoon in the Dark Universe. I would love to see a Blumhouse Universal Monster series. Maybe not Dark Universe. Maybe they could call it something else. I think we need to, bury, pun intended, the Dark Universe. Jacob.
The Darker Universe.
Darker Universe. Jacob, would you like to see Blumhouse do the Dark Universe? And what is your pitch for a Blumhouse-style reinterpretation of the Universal Monsters franchise?
Oh, I absolutely want to see this. People forget, because they're so revered, that the original Universal Monster movies were B movies. They were made on super low budgets, shot on quick schedules, starring non-stars. They were very much the kind of movies Blumhouse makes now, except being made in the 30s and 40s. So this is actually a perfect fit. And what I would want to see is for Blumhouse to embrace the fact that they're low budget movies and just make these small, intense, character-driven horror stories. I mean, take Frankenstein, take Dracula, but give it that ruthless edge that the best Blumhouse movies have. Give it, that sort of the social intensity of Get Out. Give it the lurking dread of paranormal activity. Don't make it truth or dare. Avoid that. Get some directors who know what they're doing. But I don't know. I guess I love the idea of the heroes in these movies being professors who pore over books filled with dread, as opposed to Tom Cruise being an action hero. So I want monsters, I want professors, I want 90-minute runtimes, and I want low budgets, and that'll be perfect for me.
So you want an exhibition with a bunch of professors and scientists into a ancient mummy tomb, and they get trapped inside, and it's told from found footage?
Other than the found footage part, you're describing what sounds like a pretty good take on the mummy. I'll take that. But even then, I'll take the found footage version too, because I'm a sucker for that nonsense.
HJ, do you want to see the Blumhouse do the Universal Monster franchise?
I'm actually intrigued by that too, because I do like the low budget approach for these kind of movies. I do agree that I feel like they've always been B movies to me, and I feel like they would do best to stick with that. So yeah, I'm down to see it. I don't have a huge knowledge of all the Blumhouse like styles and flares, but I think that's a good idea.
Yes. I for some reason don't think it's going to happen. Universal, I think, thinks there's too much money, and if they give them the Blumhouse, maybe it would be, for a term like ghettoizing this huge franchise into a lower budget kind of realm, where they've made so much money off the Universal Monsters over the last 100 years. Is that correct, Jacob?
Maybe a little less than 100, but
yeah.
But like 80, 90 years at this point.
Yeah, so I just don't see this happening as much as I would like to see it happen. But yeah, we have reached the end of today's Slash Film Daily. Jacob, where can people find more of your work online?
I'm on slashfilm.com every single day, and I'm on Twitter, where I'm at Jacob S. Hall.
HT, where can we find more of your work?
I'm also every day at slashfilm.com, and I'm on Twitter at HTranBuoy.
And Chris, where can I find you?
Also slashfilm.com and on Twitter at Evangelista413.
You can find me at SlashFilm on all social media. You can find all the stories we talked about today in the show notes and on slashfilm.com. Slash Film Daily, this podcast, is published every weekday on slashfilm.com, on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send us your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to Peter at slashfilm.com. And go rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you tomorrow.